So good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're dialing in from. It is definitely my honor and pleasure to share our experiences with you this afternoon. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Secura for inviting me to speak to you this afternoon. Important words that I want you to take away from my seminar this afternoon is basically about disruptive innovations, integrating process improvements with the patient in mind. So with that, I'll move to the next slide. What I'm going to cover in the next 45 minutes is basically giving you an idea about some of the drivers in our industry that require change. I'll tell you a little bit about our lean journey and what we did in terms of process improvements in our pathology laboratory. I will share the outcomes we've achieved, the lessons learned, and hopefully we'll do that in 45 minutes and give you a chance to ask some questions, because from my perspective, that's the most valuable part of these webinars. So let me start with just going over a few points which are a reality regardless of which part of the world you function in a laboratory. We are well aware of our professional shortages and the need to do more with less resources. We are also well aware of all of the pressures that accompany the focus on reducing budgets, reducing cost, and combined with the fact that we are being requested to improve operational efficiencies and staff productivity. And of course, at the other end of the spectrum, whenever things go wrong, as happens quite frequently, we get a lot of negative media attention, and when you look upon that as an incentive to do better, it certainly is helpful to know that we do have a very high quality service that we provide. And I've just had the good fortune of talking to colleagues in Australia and in the United Kingdom, and I can tell you that they all share the same sentiment, that we don't get enough media attention for the good work we do on a regular basis. Anyway, that being said, that's our reality, that's the world we live in. One of the points that I'm going to bring up in my presentation is about the availability of real-time data so that we can make quick and informed decisions in real time. And I'll be honest, in the two hospitals that I represent this afternoon, one of the drawbacks that I encounter frequently is having information or data sent to me which is 3 months old, and with all due respect to everyone who produces those reports, they're somewhat irrelevant if you're trying to make real-time changes. So I'll be talking a little bit more about that later on in my presentation. The other aspect of what's going on in our industry, we seem to be in a constant state of change, and we just have to acknowledge that's reality as well. From my perspective, in order to deal with change and achieve successful outcomes, here are some of the elements that I believe are critically important to help us survive. So first of all, it starts with good leadership. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a subsequent slide, but it's also critical that you have a very good understanding of what your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats are in your particular environment, so that you can take advantage of the opportunities and deal with it from a point of strength. We are also now recognizing very clearly in the industry that there is a need to empower staff and hold them accountable as professionals for the outcomes that we expect when we have to deliver a service to our patients on a 24/7 basis. The other aspect, and I'm dealing with it from a point of view of the lean study that we did at the two hospitals, basically this whole focus about putting the patient at the center of all of our decisions and our processes, and I'll have more to say about that in subsequent slides. The other aspect as well is about sustaining change, and I'm going to be sharing with you some very critical outcomes where you'll see in a very transparent manner we had a great start to our journey, and then we encountered some very difficult hurdles, and you'll see that in the results. And last but not least, even based on my experiences with lean over the past decade, I can tell you without any hesitation that you can never, ever over-communicate with your staff, with your peers, about the mechanisms that are needed for change management. So bear that in mind as well. When it comes to leadership, it's important that you have a champion who can lead people and influence your staff, your teams, whoever, to follow a vision that is both inspiring and engaging. There has to be some reason why people will follow a leader, and I will be bold enough to say, without effective leadership, your probability of success with any change management is extremely small or diminishes very rapidly. The aspect of leadership that we need to really pay attention to is about being decisive, having actions and results that are important for the outcomes from a patient perspective, and above all, just viewing problems. And as an industry, we have problems on a day-to-day basis, but if we have a mindset of accepting that as an opportunity to learn and improve and grow, it does help with motivating the team to engage in the journey. So let's just remind ourselves what lean is and why it's important. So basically, if you look in the literature, lean is basically a strategy to eliminate waste and non-value added activities in order to meet a client patient's need or demand. That is critical. It's about the patient, it's about the client. It's not really about you or me or what's convenient for the staff. It's about the client. And of course, once you engage in that type of thinking, the opportunity to improve operational efficiencies and processing capacity grows exponentially. If you review the literature, there are many very well-documented cases of outcomes which are extremely impressive. And the main categories where people buy into lean, or the reason why people adopt lean, is basically to optimize all of these elements that are in the slide. Certainly, it helps to improve workflow. It increases patient and client satisfaction. It most certainly helps you to use your resources wisely and to utilize your resources based on strengths, based on capacity, based on professional scopes of practice, and those are all valuable in this day and age. So in our particular case, let me tell you why at Grand River Hospital and St. Mary's we needed to adopt a lean culture. Without a doubt, if you just want to look at these bullet points in reverse, we did not have any of these in place, and as a result, we were not meeting our clients' needs. We had a lot of dissatisfied clients. Our turnaround times were not meeting standards. We had backlogs, we had crises, and we had to do things differently because it was not sustainable, that type of pressures on a day-to-day basis. But above all of those, it was also an opportunity for us to influence a lean culture in our organization and in our department, and to educate and train staff. So I just want you to hear that the story that unfolds from this point forward, we were the first department at Grand River Hospital and St. Mary's to undertake a full lean study, and with that we were going to serve as a benchmark not only for our department but for other areas of the hospital. So there was a lot of pressure and a lot of commitment to ensuring success with this first ever lean project. And this goes back to January of 2011, which is about 20 months ago. So just to be transparent, here is some of the issues we had before we started our lean journey. In no particular order, there's no question that we were disintegrated when it comes to pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical processes. We had uncontrolled batch sizes. It varied by hour, it varied by day, it varied by week, and basically we were always prioritizing or reprioritizing because we didn't even know what the extent or the magnitude of our backlog cases were until we started to truly understand what our opportunities were by doing a mapping exercise. And as I've said previously, we were not meeting our clients' needs, and that was very disturbing for all of us and our patients. So just to give you an idea of our pre-lean days and why it was a concern for us, here's a chart of our turnaround times. And at that time, we were using this standard. It's from the United States. And basically, the turnaround times were 3 days for a biopsy, non-gynae, and for gynae and cytology, 7 days for a routine turnaround time of a surgical case, and 14 days. So if we just draw a bar at 90%, you will see for that period of pre-lean, which is January to March of 2011, we were not meeting our turnaround time standards, and we were not even close when it comes to biopsies. So that was the state at that point in time. I don't have the time to go into every detail of what we did in order to get our outcomes, but we had to set ourselves some ambitious goals. So the first ambitious goal was we were going to have our turnaround times 90% of all cases in 5 days. We were going to have a turnaround time of 90% of cases in 5 days, standardize our workflow, ensure that the workload was distributed equitably and consistently between the pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical, and hopefully improve operational efficiencies and QA practices. Another aspect of the goals that we set for ourselves was we needed to eliminate the backlogs, or at least have them at a level that we felt comfortable with. And lean is all about reducing or eliminating non-value-added processes. So we also tackle that aspect of the goal. And of course, I talked about educating lean and then having the ability to transfer knowledge and skills, not only to the people in the pathology department, but within the Department of Lab Medicine and in due course to other areas of the hospital. So just to give you a sense of where this is going, this slide about backlogs tells you where we used to be and where we are today. The post-lean numbers that I've put there are basically where we are as of earlier this month. So as far as accessioning, this is a great story. In the pre-lean days, we used to have about 20 cases a day left over. Now, one of the fundamentals in lean is you have to feel comfortable asking the question why in a non-confrontational way, and we asked why 5 times, and if the answer made sense by the 5th why, then there was some validity to having that process in place. So when we asked the question about accessioning, we didn't understand why we had 20 cases per day until we started to probe deeper. And you'll really enjoy this. So the story goes like this. Sometime in the year 1845, someone decided it was a good idea to stop accessioning surgical specimens at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And from that point onwards, the backlog would start. There was no good reason, there was no good documentation, but the moral of the story is that's why we had 20 cases a day. So you can see when you look at post-lean, we soon corrected that particular process. Going down the stream, grossing, we used to have anywhere for large cases a backlog of 10 to 14 days. Now we're sort of 0 to 6 days on a bad day, in a bad week. And then the one thing that I do want you to get a hold of, to recognize is the reports that we sign out, and this is one of the outcomes from our study. Pre-lean days, 30% of our pathology reports took more than 10 days to get signed out. Today, we are around the 4% and is declining rapidly. All right, so the next slide, which is just a cartoon, is to have 2 stories coming out of it. First of all, we just didn't want our patients to become skeletons waiting for their pathology reports. But secondly, based on our existing conditions and our current state, we also had to address the skeletons in our closets. And let me assure you, there was many of those as well. What did we do with respect to creating the future state or the new model in order to sustain our understanding of what our opportunities were? First of all, as I said previously, it was all about the client and the patient, and that was the front and center of the start of the problem solving. We then move very quickly to a supermarket model where the client pulls service. So what that means in a pathology laboratory, the client pulls the pathologist, who in turn pulls the technical component, who in turn pulls the grossing component, who in turn pulls the accessioning component, and who in turn pulls the specimen collection. Now, based on our experiences and what we got to learn as we got into this particular study, many laboratories worldwide seem to do lean from the technical component through to specimen collection and don't get into the pathologist or to the client side of things. We did the whole spectrum because in our perspective, we did not want to create silos of workflow processes which could lead to further inefficiencies. So we dealt with that upfront, and that, I believe, is quite a precedent that was created as part of our study. The second thing is we decided the pathologist would set the daily workflow pace, and I will have more comments to make about that in a subsequent slide. But it was important for us to have our staff scheduled based on the need for continuous flow, and basically we were starting to work with what I refer to as FIFO, which is basically first in, first out workflow, with the presumption that whatever comes in must go out, be it on a weekly or a daily basis, and again, allowing for some fluctuation in workloads because that's not predictable. That has some challenges, and I'll speak to that as well in another slide. All right, so continuing on with the future state vision, it is also important to appreciate that batching in a lean model is frowned upon. There's always going to be a need for batching, but it needs to be minimal, and it needs to ensure that it's needed for patient or client satisfaction or meets a need for the client or the patient. The other aspect was integrating our pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical. So what we mean there is the technical assistants that deal with the pre-analytical, meaning the accessioning, etc., had to be integrated with the technologists that do the analytical component of the pathology and the histology and cytology, and had to be connected and integrated with the post-analytical, which is where the pathologists come in, and they then have to ensure from a patient perspective that they're signing out a report after having received the slides and after the slides have been processed, having been accessioned. So that was important for us, and that, let me state at the outset, was a profound change in how we process our work pre and post lean. And at that point in time, we were then able to get a handle on our backlogs because it became visible. And our goal was then, or vision was, no more than 2 days of backlogs. And we're pretty good with that for the most part in the last year that we've implemented some of this. And last but not least, part of our vision was, instead of being reactive, remember I mentioned we were always in a crisis, we were always fighting fires. We just wanted a workflow model where we could be proactive and where we could predict rather than be reactive. And there are evidences, and I'll share some examples where that's worked for us over the last year. When it comes to change management principles, I want to underscore how important this is. We were going to take our staff members through profound changes and basically remodel how work had been done for many, many years in this organization. So it was important to have some principles up front because we recognized times were going to change, circumstances were going to change, processes were going to change. So our principles were pretty simple. We had a zero tolerance for blame and shame tactics related to the past, or any tactics that sort of suggested got you principles. We did not want to have that as part of the learning and improving and moving forward in our new workflow model. And we also sold this as an opportunity to learn and improve, not only from a point of view of making it better for our clients and patients, but also picking up some skills for the staff so that they could be in a better position to manage their daily workflow and their daily workload. We also asked for respectful interactions. Many of us were put in the sandbox for the first time, different categories of staff, different titles of staff, different skill sets of staff. So it was important that we appreciated each other's strengths and respected each other. And at the end of the day, we also made it a principle that we would only make decisions that were evidence-based. If you had an opinion, we would hear your opinion, but you would have to justify that with data or bring some evidence for the change. And of course, at the end of the day, it's about having that mindset of people that are prepared to just do it, try it, and not be frightened about a failure if it needs to be reevaluated. So what are some of the things that we did which helped us to be successful with our implementation? I've always maintained it's great to have an exciting vision, it's great to have a great idea, but it doesn't really come to fruition until it's implemented successfully, and that's where the challenges lie. So what helped us was having standardized project charters for all of the team members. We invited volunteers to participate in our study, and we provided them with dedicated time, and we made it essential that we would work through consensus and we would focus all of our efforts on system thinking as opposed to silo thinking. We also avoided analysis paralysis because that can really hold you back, or chasing the perfect solution. And I know as medical lab technologists or people in this profession, we seem to have a high level of wanting to be perfect with everything. That's all very honorable, but there comes a point in time when you have to try through trial and error certain things in order to make incremental improvement. So these are the philosophies we use to help us implement successfully. And then what really helped us to accomplish our successes and meet some of the challenges was having teamwork, which was supported by a project charter. And in the project charter, it was very clear what the scope of the project was going to be, who was accountable for what the expectations for behavior were, what the expectations for outcomes was, and the timelines. And that was upfront so that people who wanted to contribute and participate understood what the commitments were. We did a current state and a future state mapping of our situation, and that's how we were able to identify through the Kaizen teams what our opportunities were for the future. And I can tell you that by implementing FIFO and Supermarket, we were able to see rapid improvements in the first 3 months of going live, and I'll show you the data soon. And as part of that, we implemented what we refer to as the Rapid Response Team interventions. This is a team of individuals who are very familiar with the workflow and went around on a daily basis to just monitor where things were in terms of turnaround times or bottlenecks or issues that may arise as a result of any problems for the day. So here's just a typical example of the various Kaizens that came forward as opportunities and then the teams worked on. It's a busy slide, but I'll just tell you the blue slides are the blue Kaizens are the cytology opportunities. The green are the histology, where the technologists were basically involved with the processing, and the yellow ones are the Kaizens that the pathologist had to deal with as a team in order to help us bring it all together as an integrated approach to meeting our objectives as well as our vision. Before we got into going live and piloting the changes, we needed to go through a period of concept or model acceptance for our staff as well as us being comfortable that we were on the right track with our objectives. So here is where we, in the month of February to March of 2011, we did a 3-week study of the number of cases coming in for cytology, surgical, and then we did a daily average so that we could get a sense of what the pace needed to be for us to base our model on. So at the end of that 3-week period, we felt 150 cases a week, plus or minus 30%, was something that we felt was a good starting point, and as it happens a year later, it still is valid in terms of the pace that has been set by the pathologist in order for us to maintain daily workflow. On this particular slide, I've just summarized the many changes that were put in place in order for us to achieve our outcomes. And I'll go through this bullet by bullet only because each one of them is a contributory factor to our outcome. So the first thing is we eliminated pre-assignment of cases to pathologists, and that saved us about 2 hours a day of staff time. Instead of MLTs and technical assistants doing accessioning, we switched that over to a function of clerical because there was a lot of data entry. That helped us a bit, picked up about an hour a day. In the histology, they created a work cell where the same technologist embeds cuts and stains in flow so that we were not handing off batches and doing compared to the previous workflow model, and that helped us to improve workflow as well. In cytology, we reduced the gynae cases that had to be rescreened by 30%, and what that meant is because of the volumes we have, we used to have a mechanism for quality purposes where we rescreened everything, including the negatives, depending and related to the criteria that were put in place based on our accreditation body. So there was some overlap there which we were able to address. That helped us pick up about another hour or two of tech time every day. And I've spoken to the fact that from the pathologists, instead of the slides being delivered to their offices, they now have to go to the supermarket and pull slides, and we have a standardized way that they do that, and that basically supports the pull versus the push workflow model that we've adopted. This slide basically tells you about business intelligence and the application and how it's benefited us. So just to digress a little bit, the company that we are using is Vuix. It's based in California, and about halfway through our study last year, this company approached me and talked about their ability to help us to obtain information in almost real time. Because remember, as I said, in the past, we would get data 3 months after the fact, and it was really quite disturbing that we couldn't make the changes because it was retrospective. So the mantra we set for ourselves, or a principle, was God we trust, everyone else bring data. And this is where Vuix and the business intelligence application helped us because of the following reasons. First of all, if you're not familiar with these tools, this is pretty trend-setting these days, and it uses cloud technology, and it's a software as a service type of application. You get the data almost in real time. In our particular situation, we get fresh data which is updated every 24 hours, which helps us with operational decision making. It's evidence-based if we have to make any interventions. And of course, it helps us to manage relationships with our clients. We can now almost predict if we're going to have a backlog or not. And the visual displays that we have as a result of this application also enables us to manage our workflow very effectively and efficiently on a day-to-day basis. So the next few slides I will go through tells you about the various outcomes we've achieved and the lessons we've learned over the past 18 months of having undertaken this journey. Let's start with turnaround times. In our particular hospitals, we define this as the time we've accessioned the case to the time that it is signed out by the pathologist. So all I want you to take away from this slide is Q1 is pre-lean. We really went live with lean on the 18th of September, which is really part of Q2. Our first full quarter with lean experiences was Q3 of 2011, that's shown in blue. And then Q4, January to March 2012, which is the first part of this year, and you'll see quite categorically that we had some slippage. And everything was going so well. Now I can give you 10,000 reasons why we had slippage. That's not important. The main thing is we were able to realize through the business application model that's available to us through Vuix to start understanding what was happening in Q4, and we made some changes. Now, I didn't have the data to show you after Q4 because soon after, on the 2nd of April, in my laboratory at Grand River Hospital, we had a very significant crisis where we had to shut the laboratory down for almost 2 weeks due to a contamination incident, and we never quite recovered for that for several weeks and months, and that disrupted our workflow in every aspect of the laboratory. Plus, as I speak to you today, we're still not fully recovered in the core laboratory. So the key message I want to give you here is, when you look at this graph, as a result of Q2 and Q3, we were able to see some steady improvements at 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 7 days, and 10 days. And then, of course, in Q4, we had some slippage, and I'll speak to that subsequently again. This slide basically just shows you the improvements. If we compare October to December 2010, which is pre-lean, versus October to December 2011, which is post-lean, again, you will see, other than the 4 days, which we had only because we were paying too much attention to biopsies and not enough attention to the large and to the routine cases. That's why that anomaly at 4 days. But our goal is 90% in 5 days, and what you can see between 5, 7, and 10, pre and post-lean, another example of incremental improvement. So this slide again shows you pre and post lean, and again, steady improvement. We never really had a very significant problem with cytology, but again, this slide just shows you the improvements. The next slide is going to be about the various dashboard indicators that we've been using, and I'll just spend a little bit of time on this because it also relates to the Vuex application that we use. So in our organization, we have used the green, yellow, and red indicators to give us a sense of whether a case is more than 5 days old, and if it's less than 75 cases in the system, it's green. If it's between 75 and 150, it's yellow. If it's more than 150 cases, we're in red. And we have this right across the system. And in the slide below, in the chart below that, you will see the domino effect of how that works for us. So example, if accessioning is in the red zone on day 3, and we do nothing about addressing that, we can now predict that on day 4, grossing will be in red. On day 5, cutting will be in red, and the sign-outs will be in red on day 6, which doesn't help matters in terms of meeting our standards. On the other side, we now have color-coded cassettes, containers, requisitions for the supermarket based on the day of the week, Monday being black, Friday being orange. So right away when you go into the supermarket, one can see from that supermarket whether we are 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 days behind. And this is a very powerful visual that everyone can see very quickly. So this particular slide is basically our manual board that is sitting in the corridor for everyone to see. And we have fine-tuned this. As you'll see, there's a V6 in the middle of the screen, which has been changed 6 times in the last 8 months. And that's a good sign because it gives us an indication that people are paying attention and making suggestions for improvement. But simply, as you'll see from here, on the August the 7th, we accessioned 105. We signed out 120. We have 476 cases in the system, and we have 118 cases which are more than 5 days. The only reason this is manual still is because we have a work in progress with Vuex. Ultimately, the vision is this will be available on every one of our dashboards or our PCs or our monitors electronically, and we hope that will happen in the next few months. The next slide is just a weekly summary of what we have. So we not only monitor this daily but weekly. Same principles. In that week, if we look at July 18th to 22nd, we accessioned 761 that week. We only signed out 667. That's not good, so there is a variance. And then on the far side, you will see we have a quick manual board which tells us on that particular day of the week, grossing is in the yellow zone. histology, cytology, and supermarket are in the green zone. All manual, but very effective. With respect to Vuex, we get now some electronic information on a daily basis. So this is just an example of the grossing that's done by the pathologist assistant. Very quickly, we can tell now on a daily basis who has grossed how much from in terms of productivity and workflow, and there's always going to be some fluctuation because of the type of cases or the number of people available. Again, this is information we didn't have in the past, and now that we know this, we can then assess and allocate resources to ensure we don't get into the red zone, which is being proactive. We have a similar type of dashboard indicator for pathologists. This is a busy slide, but I'll just explain it. There's 3 days of the week there. The pathologists are anonymized in terms of A to L at the bottom of the slide. The top part of the slide is the number of cases that each pathologist signed out. The bottom part of the slide is basically how many slides were involved with the number of cases signed out, because as you know, a case could be 1 slide, could be 100 slides, and that does make a difference into the number of cases that can be signed out. So the other indicators are here, which is makes it more busy, is we can tell whether a pathologist has done a lot of cytology or a lot of histology or surgical cases, and this is all brand new relevant information that we did not have access to without the business information application that we're using from Vuex. So it's been very helpful in that regard, and as I said to you, when we got into the crisis, which happened on April 2nd, and we had to shut down the pathology lab for two weeks, we came back to a backlog of over 1,000 plus cases. And I can tell you very proudly that the team was able to handle that backlog and clear it in 10 working days while accepting new cases coming in. And the primary reason we were able to do that is because we had access to timely information. Folks, this is our improvised, patented supermarket, and as you can see, it's very simple. It's an old bookcase from 1845. And basically we split it up into 5 days of the week, and it's allowed us to color code each day of the week. And as you can see here, on the date that this picture was taken, we're in pretty good shape. We indicate what's the oldest slides in the system. It's less than 3 days old, less than 2 days in the system, so it's a green light for this particular supermarket. Alicia, in the interest of time, if you could just advance the slide for me, that would be really helpful. So, as we draw to the end of this presentation, I just want to give you an indication of how rapidly we implemented these changes, the successes we have, and we really went live in September, but it was very important for us to get a very good understanding of how the staff were feeling about the changes, because they were profound in terms of what they were accustomed to and what the new model was for everyone in the department. So on this particular slide, which was done about a month and a half after we went live, we asked some very pertinent questions of the staff, and as you'll see from this slide, we have got a very positive response that it made a difference, and it was beneficial not only for operational purposes but also for our clients, also for the service we provide. And I think the one question we asked, overall job satisfaction, if you combine improve significantly with marginally improvement, you'll see that we have a high rating of almost 80+%, which was quite remarkable in that short period of time. And I can tell you, although we're in September 2012, if I was to do the same survey again, it's my prediction we would get similar, if not higher ratings, because we've had some very positive experiences with this. So what worked well for us? Basically, we eliminated the silo culture between technical assist, clerical people, technologists, pathologists. We are now one team, one system. We work with the patient's interest in mind. Introducing working first in, first out was a big benefit. The supermarket model has worked very well for us. I will say, in order for the supermarket to work, you've got to have a lot of trust, a lot of good teamwork, a lot of good team dynamics between pathologists and technologists. So this is not an approach that could work in an environment all over the place. It needs that level of interaction with the professionals involved. Engagement of frontline staff was a big bonus for us and helped us to achieve success. And training and our advisory committee, who served as champions for this particular study, was really instrumental in us achieving success so rapidly, and we've sustained it for the most part other than during the time of the crisis. So what lessons can I offer you if you decide to go down this path? I can't emphasize enough about how important communication is. When we did our, and these, by the way, came from the staff when we did our staff status engagement survey. We communicated, we thought, very well, but it wasn't good enough. It wasn't plenty enough. So that's an important lesson, and we accept that as a lesson learned from our perspective. We also learned it's important to have an open mind. You can't chase perfection on day one. You have to be prepared to bite the bullet and muddle through, and as long as you evaluate and make improvements, it helps with success. And all of these statements came from the staff that added their comments to the engagement survey. So in terms of sustaining performance, I just want to say we've had our ups, we've had our downs, we've learned from them. We have always kept our eye on the ball, and it's very easy to go off track, as we found out the first quarter after we had wonderful performance. We took our eye off the ball. We had some deviations from standard operating procedures, but we identified it and corrected. So the key message is keep monitoring daily, keep your eye on the ball, keep a close tab on your visuals, and then you can take corrective actions quickly. We also had to accept there are certain things that need to be escalated to the senior management, and in our particular case we recognized that we needed to have a minimum number of staff in the various processes, otherwise we couldn't sustain our goals. And to that, the hospital supported us by helping us to add some staffing so that we could have minimum staffing 5 days a week in order to maintain our goals. And last but not least, the dashboard that I've talked about through Vuex, this is a work in progress. We haven't quite completed all of our work, but at the end of the day, it's been valuable in helping us to get where we are, and it's been something that has helped us to make decisions that are evidence-based. And of course, if it's evidence-based and the data is reliable, it reduces the tendency to have resistance to change. I will wind up and open it up for questions and answers.
For the audience, if you have any questions, please type them into the question box. And as you do so, I would like to introduce a featured product that we're offering, and it's actually a promotion. So we have 2 processors for the combined price of $149,900. This is U.S. pricing. So you get the TissueTech X50 and the VIP 6 for the combined price of $149,900. This promo is active and available until the end of this year. Contact your local sales rep to get more information. We do have a lot of thank yous since that this was a great webinar coming through. And I do have one question, but I believe you answered it, but just to make sure, regarding slide number 23, please repeat the name of the IT company from California who you are working with.
Vuex. I'll just spell it to make sure. V-I-E-W-I-C-S. Vuex.
Thank you.
And if anyone would like more specific information about Vuex, I think it would be easiest if they emailed you, Alicia, and then you can contact me and I can provide more contact information.
Great. I think our audience would appreciate that.
Sorry, and that also goes if people are not in a position to ask questions or may come up with a question later, I'll be more than happy to speak with you directly or email you. Again, go through through Alicia with your questions, and we will respond to you as quickly as we can.
Great, thank you. I think your webinar was so well put together and so informative, not many people have questions. So at this time, unless more questions come through, I just would like to thank everybody for attending today's webinar, and have a great day.